Welcome back to my TCG Story. This is episode 3. I've been telling you guys about the RPG story that I had developed with my Pokemon cards, and in episode 3 today we're going to get into a couple of the new things that we haven't covered so far, such as the encounters, the trainer decks that you can battle, and then some other encounters. So far, what we've gone over in episode 1, we talked about picking a starter in session 1 and getting to be able to have a delivery assignment. And then episode 2, we did the delivery, finishing the delivery assignment and some other things that you're able to do. And then I also talked about all the different archetypes: water, fire, the poison, and electric metal decks. So let's get into the encounters first. Ghost Tower, a trashy situation, forest poisons, and moon fairies. What I've done here is all 4 decks use a similar game mechanic, and that is mostly what is here with the de-evolution spray. De-evolution spray allows you to de-evolve one of your Pokemon. Let's get that down there so that you guys can read it as well. It allows you to de-evolve one of your evolved Pokemon and put the highest stage evolution card into your hand, and then essentially be able to lay that Pokemon down again for whatever the effect is. So what I've done is all 4 of these decks use the same trainer cards that are found here. So I've marked them with these blue papers. That way, when I play with one, then I can take all these cards out and put them into the next scenario for our encounter, so for the player to be able to engage with. So all 4 of these decks use the same set of trainer cards that you see here. And the main thing here is De-Evolution Spray. So that's one of the main cards that is used in the deck, and Acerola and Super Scoop Up are used in the same sort of way. Both of these allow you to return a Pokemon from play back to your hand and then be able to play it again at some point. Some of the more typical cards that are in here, you've got an energy search using interviewers' questions. Both of Pokemon Communication and Roseanne's Research allow you to search your deck for Pokemon. And then you've got some draw mechanics. Professor Oak's New Theory, which allows you to discard, shuffle your hand in your deck and then draw 6 cards. Zizu allows you to draw cards until you have 1 more card in your hand than your opponent. And then Trekking Shoes allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, or allows you to look at the top card of your deck, and you can choose to either put that in your hand or your discard pile. If you put it in your discard pile, you get to draw an additional card. And then there's some capture energies, and then in the scenarios and the encounters, I've also got found special items, and there's some of these as well in the wilds. And I showed you in the last episode at the very end, when these appear, I put these aside and I tell the player that they found a special item, and then they're able to access some special items for their deck that can be unique and for whatever their scenario is. So yeah, so all of these decks here use this same set of trainer cards. Each deck has a different story mechanic to it, and different sets of Pokemon that can utilize these same trainer cards. All right, so let's get into some of the story elements of what these decks are. So Ghost Tower is just like you would imagine from the video game. You can imagine, so in the story mode, the story element of it is that you're going through a tower and it's haunted, and you meet a lot of haunted Pokemon. There's a Ghastly and Gengar in this deck, and the cards that can utilize the de-evolution spray is this Crobat line. When you play this Pokemon, or even the Golbat, you're able to put damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. The Crobat allows you to put 3 damage counters, and the Golbat allows you to put 2. And then their attacks allow you to target bench Pokemon. The Ghost Tower also uses, so it's mostly like Ghost and haunting type of Pokemon. And so there's also this Banette, which has its own de-evolution effect, but you're able to de-evolve your opponent's Pokemon. So that's kind of what Ghost Tower is about. The next one is a Trashy Situation. Trashy Situation is about trash Pokemon. So sometimes I make up a story where you're helping somebody remove the trash, or with my nephew, most recently, I had him just like walking down the street and there was some piles of trash that fell over on him and the Pokemon attacked him. And it was like he got sucked up by the trash. So there's a skunk Pokemon, the Laloon and Obstagoon and Zigzagoon. This Pokemon here, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. And then the basic Pokemon here, when you play him, you can put damage counters down. So this deck also uses like Muck and also, I forgot his name, Trubbish and Garbodor. Forest Poisons is, I imagine that the player would be in like going through the forest and then you get attacked by a bunch of poison Pokemon. I have yet to play this, so I actually don't know if it's a little overpowered or underpowered or if the deck works super well, but I've played all the other scenarios with the players so far. Forest Poisons uses Butterfree. When this Pokemon when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon burned, confused, and poisoned. So this deck uses special conditions. So there's the Butterfree line, and then I also have Vileplume in here. This Vileplume in particular, when you play it, you can look at the top 8 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic energy cards you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. Moon Fairies uses Clefairy, who's in here, and the Pokemon that it uses to take advantage of the de-evolution spray is Meowstic, which allows you to search your deck for 2 supporter cards and put them into your hand when you evolve it. It also uses the Togekiss and Togepi line, which is whenever you evolve these Pokemon, you're able to heal damage. So whenever you play them, you're able to heal your own Pokemon and take advantage of the healing factors there. Then there's also this Beware, which is you're in the forest, there's Moon Fairies, and the Beware comes out and attacks you. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may draw 3 cards. So there's a series of cards there that are able to take advantage of the de-evolution spray. So that's how all of these decks here are able to take advantage of the trainer cards that are built in for each deck. And so it's kind of nice that I have these papers in here because then I can just organize the cards. And then the main reason why I did this is so that my trainer cards can go farther. I don't have that many trainer cards, and I'm assuming that a lot of kids probably don't. I mean, I do have a lot of them. But I figured that this was a good way to set up where I could use the same set of trainer cards in multiple decks and get different experiences out of them for the player when they're going through each encounter. So let's get into each of these decks just a little bit more. I want to show you the different Pokemon that are in each of them. So the Ghost Tower deck is an all-psychic deck, and it utilizes the power of Golbat and Crobat to be able to put damage counters onto the Pokemon. It also utilizes Haunter, which has the attack, put 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. And so what your basic goal is to be able to put your damage counters down on as many of your opponent's Pokemon as you can. And then you use a Pokemon like Bravery, his free attack here. You put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that have any damage counters. So then you're even splashing around a lot more damage. And then once you're able to knock out a lot of your opponent's Pokemon, there's a few that are going to be left over, and that's what Gengar here is used for. The Creepshow attack, if your opponent's active Pokemon has 3 or more damage counters in it, that Pokemon is knocked out. And so I can knock out any HP Pokemon any Pokemon with any amount of HP, even if they only have 3 damage counters on them, which is pretty powerful. So this deck utilizes just splashing damage counters among everybody. And then I also run a 1/1/1 line of La Luna, who the Lunar Pain, the top attack, double the number of damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So just another way for me to get those damage counters out there. It also runs 2 Gape Draw Bogs, which is whenever a player puts a basic Pokemon from their hand into the bench, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And then it utilizes these cards as well, just as utility to make the deck run a little bit smoother. This is one of my favorite game mechanics, using Gengar and these cards. It just works really well. It's kind of cool. So that's how the Ghost Tower deck encounter works. A Trashy Situation is a Psychic Dark deck, and the way that it utilizes its cards, you've got the Obstagoon and Laloon to be able to just do some damage. But then it utilizes Garbodor. There's 2 different Garbodors in here, a Psychic and a Dark one. This Garbodor utilizes the Pokemon tools. This attack does 20 damage for each item card in your opponent's discard pile. So it's a good late game card, and it also utilizes Misfortune Sisters in the same way. Look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard any number of item cards you find there. Your opponent shuffles the other cards back into their deck. So that's going to be a late game card. Other earlier attackers that you want to use is this Garbodor, or even your line of Mucks that are here. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, or Sludge Whirlpool for 130. The Mucks that it has here, there's a couple different mechanics that are used here. The Muck here on the far right, the Psychic Muck, he does more damage if your opponent's Pokemon is affected by a special condition. And then this Muck makes it so that the retreat cost is less, and then your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. And this one, Toxic Strike, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. And then this also makes it so that your opponent's Pokemon don't recover from special conditions when they are evolve or devolve. So it basically uses a mix of trash Pokemon, the Mucks, Garbodors, and then the Skunk. And then it has a few other cards that are used to help just get energy acceleration, and then searching for Pokemon with heavy retreat costs, which most of the Pokemon do have. So that's a trashy situation, and this deck isn't one of the more powerful decks. It's a good starter one for players to get involved in. It is kind of hard because it deals with special conditions, so the players are going to have a hard time with that if they're not used to that, but it's a way for me to introduce them to those special conditions, whereas the next encounter deals with special conditions even more. Forest Poisons is an all-grass deck that utilizes a handful of different grass-type Pokemon. I showed you the Butterfree and the Vileplume already. The Butterfree allows you, when you evolve it, to make your opponent's Pokemon burned, confused, and poisoned. The Vileplume allows you to get energy acceleration. And then this Vileplume, each player can't play any item cards from his or her hand. So it's it makes your opponent's Pokemon poisoned, but then it also stalls out the ability to be able to play trainer cards. Then it uses these 2 Pokemon as well. Victory Bell, this is actually one of my favorite Pokemon. This version here, Stick and Absorb, heal 20 damage from this Pokemon. The defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. It does 80 damage, and then this attack here, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned, confused, and poisoned. The same 3 effects that the Butterfree did. This Butterfree is just Butterfree V, 190 HP. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned, and Blasting Wind for 130. This deck also utilizes a few different trainer cards, Rare Candy to get the evolutions out faster, since all 3 of the evolutions that are here are Stage 2 Pokemon. And then Erezu, which allows you to search for 3 evolution Pokemon. They can't be special Pokemon. And then Level Ball. Search your deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less. Reveal it and put it in your hand. And Special Energy, Herbal Energy. What does this do? When you attach this card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. So in general, this deck, you just get your Pokemon out and make your opponent's Pokemon burned, confused, and poisoned. Moon Fairies is an all-psychic deck, and it is a little nasty one. The whole goal of this deck, you've got 3 Pokemon, Togetic, which is your healer, Beware, which is your drawing card guy, and Meowstic, which allows you to find supporters. So whenever you play any of these guys, you can either heal, draw cards, or search for supporters. And then the whole deck revolves around Clefairy's ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in your active spot, for each of your benched Clefairy, you may search your deck for a Psychic Energy card and attach it to that Clefairy. Then shuffle your deck. Let's say that on your second turn, you play Gloria, which allows you to search for 3 basic Pokemon. And so you're able to get all your Clefairies out. Let's say you have 3 Clefairies out, and you search, and you use this ability. If you have a different active Pokemon, basically what it allows you to do is for each Clefairy, you can go search your deck for energy. So let's say all 3 of these are on your bench. You can search using his ability and go put an energy on each of them. With his ability, you can put an energy on each of them. With his energy ability, you can put an energy on each of them. And then their attacks do more damage for each energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So the whole point of the deck is to be able to get all your energies out onto your Clefairies as fast as you can. And then you just attack. And these guys help you do that. There's also 2 Clefas to just stay on the theme. And these are basic Pokemon who allow you to shuffle your hand and draw cards. So those are the 4 encounters that players can engage in during the game. Ghost Tower, Attractive Situation, Forest Poisons, and Moon Fairies. And a player can choose to do each encounter more than once in a game, in a whole playthrough. My nephew played the Ghost Tower in one game and lost, and then he played it in a later game and was able to beat it, which is kind of fun because then they can get a sense for what each encounter is like and be able to take advantage of how to defeat it. Okay, then let's talk about the different trainers that you're able to run into the world. With the trainers you're able to encounter, there's supposed to be a sense of progression. Bugcatcher is meant to be an early opponent that you can encounter in this scenario. His deck is only a 30-card deck, and that's because his deck isn't very good. It's designed to be not good because it's an early opponent that a player can encounter. Whereas the Rapid Strike deck that I've got here is much better, and then the Marnie deck is supposed to be even more difficult, kind of a late game deck that players are able to play against. In a lot of scenarios, I might not even pull these out and play them with the players. It just depends on how much time I have with the players. If we're playing many sessions and they're long sessions, I might have them engage with one of these players, one of these characters. But other than that, players are usually engaging with the encounters or the rivals a lot more in all the scenarios. So the Bugcatcher deck is meant to be a really basic deck that you're able to play against. It's an all-grass deck, and it uses the archetype of the Bugcatcher, like in the video games, where the Bugcatcher is really silly and not so great. He's a new trainer on his adventures as well. It uses the Bugcatcher card. Draw 2 cards, flip a coin. If heads, draw 2 more cards. This is the only draw mechanic that's in the deck. I do have an energy acceleration using Gardenia's Vigor, and then it uses Pokemon Circulator and Aether Paradise Conservation Area. Basic grass Pokemon and basic electric Pokemon take 30 less damage from the opponent's attacks. This deck also utilizes Kricketune, which does a similar thing as the Aether Paradise, where your grass Pokemon in play get plus 40 HP. That way they're a little more defensive using both of these cards. One of the main attackers that this deck has is Venonat and Venomoth. Venomoth has 70 attack with Gust, and his top attack for 1 energy, 30 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, choose a special condition. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now affected by that special condition. Then there's Wurmple, which allows you to search your deck for more Pokemon. The Dustox here allows you to
Your opponent's active opponent is now confused and poisoned. During Pokemon Checkup, put 8 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. Pretty dangerous, and the cutting wind for 110. So it's a pretty good little deck with some good attackers, but as far as it being able to do what it needs to do, it's really just relying on those first 7 cards that it starts out with, and then the next couple of cards. And so the deck doesn't have a very good late game most of the time. Meant to be an early deck that players can encounter in the game. The second trainer deck that players can oftentimes have a chance to encounter is the Mustard and Karina Rapid Strike deck. And the reason why there are 2 trainers that you can run into, there's actually 3, is I can change which character that players engage with. So like the first time playthrough, it might be Karina that I tell them that they're battling, and then the next time I might say that it's Mustard, and then another time it might be Cybold, who I'm telling the player that this deck is being run by. But this is a 3-color deck: water, fighting, and electric, but it also runs a rainbow energy and the Rapid Strike, which provides water or fighting energies. And so it's a Rapid Strike deck. It uses the Rapid Strike mechanic. So this is a Rapid Strike Spiral Energy. It can only be attached to Rapid Strike Pokemon. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides every type of energy, so it's a rainbow energy. But it also makes it so that my Pokemon can't be paralyzed, and if it's paralyzed, it recovers from that special condition. This Rapid Strike Energy is like a double energy. It can only be attached to Rapid Strike Pokemon, and as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides 2 in combination of water and fighting. The Rapid Strike trainer cards that it uses is Karina's Focus, which just allows you to draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. The Mustard here, you can play this card only when it's the last card in your hand, and then put a Rapid Strike Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench. If you do, you get to draw 5 cards. And then Cybold, which allows you to choose 2 of your Rapid Strike Pokemon and heal 60 damage from them. The main mechanic that this deck uses is you're trying to get your Inteleons out. This Drizzle, when you play it, allows you to go search for a trainer card. And then when you evolve it into Inteleon as a Rapid Strike Pokemon, it allows you to, once during your turn, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And there are 4 of these in the deck. So if you had all 4 of them, you're dealing 80 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So that's the main way that you end up dealing damage. But then it has some pretty serious little attackers as well. Dugtrio, which flip 3 coins. This attack does 60 damage for each heads. If all of them are heads during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon. Then Luxray, it utilizes Electro Step and Scar Strikes. The first attack, this attack does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And then you also switch this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. Scar Strikes does 100 damage if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, which the Inteleons allow you to do. This attack does 100 more damage. It also utilizes Octillery as a draw mechanic. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a Rapid Strike card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. You can't use more than 1 Rapid Strike search ability each turn. So that allows you to go search your deck for Pokemon and the supporter cards, or even the energies as Rapid Strike cards. There's also a few other Rapid Strike Pokemon that the deck utilizes. Kangaskhan is a pretty good little attacker. It deals flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 100 more damage. Then there's the Wishy-Washy. If this Pokemon has 3 or 4 water energies attached, it gets plus 150 HP, which as a 30 HP Pokemon is okay. This attack does 30 more damage for each basic energy attached to this Pokemon. And Lapras. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. And Splash Arch. Put all energy attached to this Pokemon into your hand. This attack does 100 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So a bench striker, which works really well with those Inteleons. It also runs a Rezu. Search your deck for up to 3 evolution Pokemon. There are a lot of evolution Pokemon in this deck. And then, let's see, Evolution Incense over here. allows you to search your deck for an evolution Pokemon, put it in your hand. Energy Lotto allows you to look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and you pick an energy card there, put it in your hand. And Arc Phone. I don't know why I decided to include this into the deck. It doesn't really synergize super well, but it does something. Look at the top card of your deck. You may switch that card with one of your face-down prize cards.
So that's the Rapid Strike deck that players can encounter in this scenario. This deck is a deck that I just referred to as Marnie, and it is actually a leftover deck from Season 1 where I played this RPG story with my daughter. And there was a character named Marnie who utilized Luminion, and she was a long-running character who I made it so that her deck, she started out as kind of like a good character that helped the main player, and then over time became a little bit darker and more darker, and eventually she was going to become a bad rival. And I never actually got to that part of the story, but I really liked the way that this deck worked. I actually have a version of this that I've used on the Pokemon TCG player or the TCG live game online, and it's a standard deck or standard format deck that utilizes Luminion's ability. And the standard one that I have works very differently than this deck, and maybe someday I'll show how that deck works on the standard format. But this deck utilizes Luminion's ability, which is when you play this Pokemon, you get to go search your deck for, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you get to go search your deck for a supporter card. So what the deck does is there's a whole bunch of different supporter cards, just one of each, basically, that you have access to and can play to be able to utilize their abilities. So, and then it also utilizes Luminion as an attacker. So its attack requires 3 energies, and the Aqua Return is the name for 120 damage. And you shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. So basically what you do is you're constantly trying to replenish your Luminions and get the energies back out onto them, which in this actual deck isn't so good. In the one that I have in the standard format, I tried to utilize that a little bit more. But basically what that does is he has 170 HP, and if your opponent doesn't knock him out in one turn, you're going to use this attack and he disappears. So any damage that they do to him is neglected because he's going to go be shuffled back into the deck. And then every time you play your Luminions, you get to search your deck for another powerful supporter card, and you're playing a powerful supporter card every single turn. The other attacker that the deck utilizes is Skunk Tank. Skunk Tank has this attack, Pursuit Blast, for 2 energy. This attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. If that Pokemon retreated from the active spot during your opponent's last turn, this attack does 120 damage instead. And then Shrieking Poison, 90 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. I think the main reason why I put Skunk Tank in the deck was he utilizes that double colorless energy, which Luminion can as well. So it only takes 2 energies, or in this case with this attack, 1 energy, to utilize the double colorless energies. I'm running double turbo energy and this double colorless energy. That way I can power up those Pokemon much faster. Those are really the only Pokemon that you use in the deck. Barbarrel, you can use to replenish your hand, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. And then there's these unknowns. These are great cards. You play them down, and then at any time you can discard it and draw a card. And then I have no idea how to say this. Pyukumuku. He has the ability, pitch a Pyukumuku, however you say it. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in your hand, you may reveal it and put it on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card. You can't use more than one of this ability each turn. So basically what it allows you to do is if you draw it, you can put it in the bottom of your deck, and you get to draw a card. The whole reason for the unknowns in this guy is so that you have basic Pokemon in the deck. But if you start out with one of them, you play a different Pokemon, then you can discard your unknown and get your other Pokemon into the active spot. If you end up starting the game with Pikiyumuku, what you can do is you play your Luminions
You get somebody into your discard pile, and then you power him up with energies, and you use Thornton to switch them. Switch the Pokemon in your discard pile with this guy. So Thornton's actually kind of fun. One of the other, and so that's basically the Pokemon that the deck utilizes. So then there's a bunch of cards that are going to be the trainer cards that are support. Adventures Discovery allows you to go find those Pokemon V, the Skunk Tank or the Luminion. Marnie is a hand disruption for your opponent. And then Irida allows you to go search for a Pokemon, a water Pokemon, and a trainer card. So I'm actually going to go over what some of these trainer cards are. There's the Quick Ball, which allows you to search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it in your hand, but you have to discard another card. Ultra Ball, you have to discard 2 cards. You get to go search for any Pokemon. Energy Lotto, look at the top 7 cards, and you get to find any one energy if you find there and put it into your hand. Escape Rope for switching, and the Gust ability for your opponent's Pokemon. Rescue Carrier allows you to get your discarded unknowns back to your hand, play them, and discard them to draw more cards. And Aqua Patch allows you to get energies back from your discard pile onto your bench Pokemon. Then some of the other trainers, you've got Giovanni's Scheme, which allows you to discard your hand, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand, but it also allows you to deal more damage if you need to. Same with Professor Kukui. This one allows you to draw 2 cards, and then your Pokemon do 20 more damage. The reason for these being able to do 20 more damage is the Luminion doing 120 damage. That's not necessarily a lot, although in this format where you're playing against players that don't have super powered decks, that can be a lot of damage and enough to knock out a good Pokemon. Thornton we talked about. Rihan is if your Pokemon is knocked out, you can go search if your opponent was knocked out last turn, you can go attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to a Pokemon, and then you can also search your deck for a card and put it in your hand. Boss's Orders switches out your opponent's Pokemon, and then Celine and Luzamine allow you to get cards back from your discard pile. So that's the deck. I think it's a really kind of unique deck in that it uses Luminion as an actual attacker, which is kind of different. A lot of people in the standard format currently would use it just as a way to get those supporters that you need to be able to play when you need them. So that's Marnie's deck. This is definitely one of the later game trainers that you're able to battle and have an experience with in my TCG Story.
Pokemon Beauty and Cuteness Contest is actually a side effect of something I've done with my nieces and my daughter, where there's a couple different ways you can play a beauty contest, and there are beauty contests in the Pokemon game, although I haven't played those games enough to know how those work exactly. One of the ways that you can play a beauty contest is when you have multiple players, each player gets access to different cards, and then you can play apples to apples style, where the player who's it gets to choose a topic, like you can say a color like fire or grass or water or blue or green, or you can have other things where that player then also gets to define the winning statistic, and then all the players play their cards face down, and the active player who picked the topic doesn't know what the topic was, and let's say you said blue, and the 4 players then reveal their cards, and the person who chose the topic as blue could then choose which card fits the topic the best, and that player would then get the point. And so that's basically how apples to apples style works. But the way that I think that works better on a one-on-one scenario is I will usually show the player the 3 judges, and then they can either have access to these cards or their own Pokemon, and then they are pitted up against random cards, and then the judges decide upon some criteria that I sometimes will define beforehand what Pokemon wins the beauty or cuteness contest. So it just kind of depends. So I have a bunch of cards from my collection here. This is actually the very first card that I got when I was a child. Well, not this exact card, but this version of this card. I don't think I have the original Nidoran anymore, but there is a whole bunch of just different cute Pokemon that I know that kids would find adorable.
in this collection that they can use for a beauty contest. And upon accomplishing the beauty contest, whether they win or lose, sometimes I will have them befriend, or if they win, they get access to some powerful trainer cards that allow them to search for energies. The very last encounter that players have access to after is the wilds. The wilds are where players can catch wild Pokemon. In this scenario, or in this RPG version, I've got all the cards set up. This is the only way for players to catch Pokemon. And I did this so that I could control a little bit more what archetypes the players have access to and what Pokemon they have access to. So there's a whole bunch of Pokemon in here, along with random energies as well, that players can eventually catch and have access to. And the general idea of the wilds is you're in the wild specifically there to hunt for Pokemon. And so depending on how quick I want the game to be, I could have them get a ticket, which allows them to get access to the wilds. And then in doing that, they might get some points or have money. I haven't figured all the logistics. And then they have access to trainer cards that they can use. These aren't in the same. How would I explain this? It's not the actually what these cards do. It's more of the idea of what they are. So like these 5 cards are Pokeballs, and so as a Pokeball, you can use one of these Pokeballs and the effects that they would have. Not what the cards actually do, but what I would have them do to be able to catch the Pokemon. So, for example, what I've had the players do is if they use a capturing aroma, they can define what type of Pokemon will show up in the encounter. And so I haven't yet defined all these things or all the rules of how catching Pokemon in the wilds work, but I've got kind of a general idea, and usually in person, I just make it up on the spot. So you've got ways to control what cards appear in the wilds that you have access to, ways to heal and defend Pokemon, an experience share, which is useful because this is a great way to, and this just works how it would work in the game, where you're literally sharing the experience that your Pokemon does when you defeat a Pokemon. And then switch would switch the active Pokemon. So I'm going to get into some of what these cards would do by explaining it this way. So the way the wilds work is the player plays a normal game of Pokemon. However, the one thing that is different is instead of having 6 prize cards that they draw upon destroying one of my Pokemon, it's the opposite. If I destroy one of their Pokemon, then they get to draw a prize card. And so that way, when the wilds encounter is winning, they can draw cards so that they can get more cards, and then when the wilds wins and makes them draw all 6 cards, then the scenario ends. So the player can really farm what they get here in this place. So an example of what I would usually do is I'll draw usually I draw like 10 cards and have a hand of 10 cards in my hand. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. And usually my deck would be face down. But then what I do is the Pokemon, I keep my hand organized and feed them in from one side, and I make it so that the Pokemon come out in the order that I'm able to find them. And I usually will play 1 Pokemon a turn, and then I can speed up or slow down my gameplay depending on how fast my opponent is going. I want it to be hard but not too difficult, so sometimes I'll make it so I can play 2 energies, and then I'll just make sure that I always have a hand full of 10 cards. So basically what happens is the Pokemon that's most farthest is going to be the active Pokemon. And then I just do whatever the attack would be. Oh, and all of the energies are just rainbow energies. It's just whatever color. And so I can put them onto any Pokemon. And then that way I just slowly, one turn at a time, power up the Pokemon, and it's usually going to be whoever the most active Pokemon is. And so sometimes they're really hard Pokemon and powerful, and they do big, powerful things, and sometimes they're not so powerful, like a Jinx, for example, where drawing 2 cards isn't really going to do much
in a encounter to be able to defeat your opponent. But what it does is it allows the player to be able to have access to these cards and try to catch them. So the way that catching works is they can switch to Pokemon and be able to bring out the Pokemon that they want to find, because you can imagine that they're wandering in the woods and they come across the Jinx, and maybe they don't want to catch the Jinx, so they run away from it, and then they go find a Reshiram, which I don't know why they're finding a legendary thing in the wilds, but there's a ton of different Pokemon in the wilds that players have access to, that are powerful, different Pokemon. And usually I have a requirement where whatever color, and so you'll notice that most of these Pokemon are colors that the archetypes are, that they have access to. So there's a bunch of different Pokemon of every different types. There's one of those found as special items. All different types of Pokemon of different types that are powerful, legendary Pokemon that they could utilize in their decks and be able to play with. So, but in order to do that, in order to get the Pokemon, they have to catch it. So that's where some of these other cards come in handy to be able to try to catch them, heal your Pokemon, switch out the Pokemon, and different Pokeballs. In general, the way that you catch a Pokemon is you have to be able to roll a dice. And I haven't figured out the exact rules of how this works, because sometimes it doesn't work very well. But let's say this Jinx, for example, it has 100 HP. If I were to roll the dice, I can't roll a 100 and be able to catch the Pokemon. The highest I can roll is a 6, right? So in order to catch this Pokemon, I have to knock its HP down and make it weaker to give me a higher chance to roll and catch the Pokemon. And so if I rolled, the highest number I could roll would be a 6, and if its HP, let's say I had four damage counters on it and had 60 HP remaining, then when I try to play a Pokeball, roll my dice, if I rolled a 6, I could catch this Pokemon. Now I'd have to roll a 6 specifically, but let's say I knock this Pokemon down to only having 10 HP left. I've done 90 damage to it. What do I have to roll then? I could roll a 1 or a 2 or higher. I have to roll higher than its HP remaining. And so what I've done, and I need to figure out the exact rules, is I need to figure out which Pokeballs change those statistics. So like an Ultra Ball or like a Master Ball, for example, would always catch the Pokemon no matter what damage you dealt, where an Ultra Ball is going to be probably one of the more powerful ones. But then I can make different rules for like a Dusk Ball or a Level Ball or different things like that. And so make it so that different Pokeballs could work well with different Pokemon. So it just kind of depends. I haven't figured out all these specifics yet. For right now, I just kind of play it as it is. And the goal here is to allow the player to catch a Pokemon. So if it's too hard, I just kind of let them catch it. Usually I'm dealing with little kids who are, 6 to 8 years old, trying to teach them how to play. So in this case, it's just a way for them to catch other Pokemon and have some fun doing it. So I really like the way the wilds work. I just haven't defined all the rules of how every little thing works, especially the catching. I think I might figure out a way to do it with like a D20 rather than one of these, or maybe a D12 or something like that instead of D6s. But I just haven't had enough time to be able to figure it out. But as I've played more and more, I've kind of figured out how some of this works and some of the logistics, and I'm still trying to just think it through and figure out how it works. So yeah, there's a lot of powerful Pokemon in here that players can have access to. I basically just went through my collection and found a bunch of good Pokemon that would be fun to be able to put together in one of the decks. So all right, so that concludes all the different encounters that players are able to come across in my TCG story. So just a quick review, all the encounters. We had Ghost Tower, Trashy Situation, Forest Poisons, and Moon Fairies. There were trainers that you could fight, Bug Catcher, Mustard, Sashkarina, the Rapid Strike deck, and Marnie. And then there was the other section, the Beauty Contest, and the Wilds. So there's a lot of things that players can do in my TCG story. And so I hope this gives you an idea of like some of the different encounters. And so if you're putting together your own little story like this, it might give you some ideas of things to be able to do and whatnot. So I've got a couple more. I've got another session or two that I need to play with my nephew. He's currently playing with the electric metal deck, and he's done a few of the encounters. Um, in the next episode, we're going to be talking about the rivals, and talking about what how I made those progression and how those work. Um, yeah, I hope you liked this episode where we got to learn about all the different encounters. I hope you guys give this video a like and subscribe for future content. I want to be able to show off future versions of my TCG story, and maybe other stories, and maybe give you some actual live gameplay of these play sessions that I'm having with all my nieces and nephews and my kids. So, yep. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.